Hey guys, tonight we're scaling the jagged peaks of the Andes, where the air's so thin your lungs beg for mercy, and the Incas somehow turned cliffs into thriving farms. Picture yourself teetering on a mountainside, clouds swirling below, as you marvel at stone terraces hugging the slopes like giant green staircases. These aren't just pretty walls. They're the backbone of an empire that laughed in the face of gravity. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this climb without some serious grit. But the Incas, they made it look easy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're chilling tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at 12,000 feet, where the Andes bite with icy winds and rocky outcrops that dare you to keep your footing. The Incas, starting around the 13th century, didn't just survive here, they thrived. Their terraces, built to tame these brutal slopes, are why. These stone-walled platforms turn near vertical mountains into farmland, feeding an empire of millions. Mainstream history credits their success to sheer necessity. Flat land was scarce, so they carved their own. You can almost feel the weight of their resolve as you trace the terrace's edges, each one a middle finger to the unforgiving terrain. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some say the Incas picked these dizzying heights partly for defense, armies huffing up cliffs to attack. Good luck. Raiders would be gasping, while Inca warriors, used to the altitude, rained stones from above. It's like the Incas turned the mountains into their personal bouncer. Historians still argue whether defense was the main driver or just a bonus. Was it all about food, or did they love making invaders sweat? You decide as you catch your breath, staring at the terraces, stretching like ribbons across the peaks. You trudge along a narrow path, the kind where one slip means a long tumble. The terraces below you stack neatly, some wide enough for a small field, others barely a ledge. The Incas didn't just slap these together. They studied the land, its curves, its moods. You notice how the walls lean slightly inward, a trick to keep them standing through earthquakes. It's engineering that makes modern architects jealous, and they did it with no blueprints, no calculators, just brains and brawn. Imagine you're an Inca planner, squinting at a slope too steep for goats. You're not thinking impossible. You're thinking steps, walls, soil. The Andes forced the Incas to get creative, but why here? Why not stick to valleys? The answer's in the microclimates. Each terrace, at a slightly different height, catches unique sun and shade. You could grow maize on one level, potatoes on the next. It's like hacking the mountain's weather system. Plus, those high altitudes meant fewer pests. Bugs hate thin air as much as you do. Here's a light chuckle for you. Imagine an Inca farmer tripping on a terrace edge, only to realize his potato crop's fine because the walls held. Clumsy, but saved by genius. You keep walking, fingers brushing cold stone. These terraces weren't just about food. They were about control. Control over land that wanted to spit you out. The Incas looked at mountains and said, "We got this." And they did, for centuries. You're starting to feel the altitude now. Legs heavy, head fuzzy. The terraces gleam in the fading light, a testament to a people who didn't just adapt, they dominated. Each step you take feels like a nod to their audacity. You wonder how they hauled stones up here, how they convinced anyone to farm on a cliff. That's coming, but for now, you're just soaking in the why. Why the Incas chose this insane terrain to build their masterpiece. It's not just about survival. It's about proving they could. You're crouching on an Inca terrace, fingers grazing the rough stone walls that somehow fit together like a cosmic jigsaw puzzle. The Andes loom around you, silent but smug, as if daring you to figure out how the Incas tamed them. Last time, you saw why they picked these cliffs: food, defense, and a knack for flipping nature the bird. Now, you're diving into the how. How did they engineer these terraces to last centuries, holding back landslides and laughing at storms? Spoiler, it's not just piling rocks. The Incas' terrace building was a masterclass in practical genius. Mainstream history points to their layered approach like a geological cake. You notice the base, big, chunky stones, sometimes boulders, wedged deep into the slope. Above that, smaller stones, then gravel, then rich soil, hauled from who knows where. This wasn't random. Each layer had a job: stability, drainage, fertility. You can almost hear the Inca foreman barking orders, making sure every rock was placed just right. No mortar, no machines, just precision that'd make a Swiss watchmaker cry. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some terraces had weeping holes, small gaps in the walls to let water seep through without wrecking the structure. It's like the Incas gave their terraces tear ducts to handle the Andes tantrums. You poke at one, half expecting it to sob. Historians still argue whether these holes were planned from the start or added after some early terraces got soggy and collapsed. Did the Incas learn the hard way, or were they always this clever? You smirk, imagining a soggy Inca engineer swearing under his breath. You stand, brushing dirt off your hands, and survey the terrace's curve. The walls aren't straight. They hug the mountain's natural contours, flowing with the land instead of fighting it. It's like the Incas danced with the Andes, not wrestled. You notice the slight inward tilt of the walls, a trick you spotted before. It's not just for earthquakes. It helps the whole terrace lean into the slope, cozying up to the mountain like a tired hiker. You try leaning too, but the wind's not as forgiving. Now, picture yourself hauling stones up this cliff. No wheel, no beasts of burden, just you, some ropes, and a team chanting to keep rhythm. The Incas used ramps and levers, maybe log rollers for the big boys. You're sweating just thinking about it, and here's a chuckle. Imagine slipping and dropping a rock, only for it to roll right back into place like it's mocking you. That's the Inca vibe. Even their mistakes look planned. The drainage system grabs your attention next. You spot channels carved into the terrace edges, guiding rainwater like a mini aqueduct. The Incas didn't just build walls, they built systems. Water flows down step terraces, never pooling, never eroding. It's so smart, you want to high-five someone, but the nearest Inca's long gone. Instead, you trace the channel with your finger, feeling the stone's cool, worn surface. This wasn't guesswork. They tested slopes, measured rainfall, probably argued over angles at dinner. Here's another joke for you. Why'd the Inca terrace never flood? Because it had better plumbing than your apartment. You grin, but it's true. Modern engineers still geek out over this. The Incas didn't have fancy degrees, but they knew gravity's rules better than most. You step onto the next terrace, noticing how the soil stays put, even on this steep incline. That's the gravel layer at work, filtering water while gripping the dirt like a jealous ex. You're starting to get it now. The terraces aren't just walls. They're a love letter to the land, written in stone and sweat. The Incas didn't conquer the Andes. They partnered with it. Each terrace feels alive, breathing with the mountain's pulse. You wonder about the tools, simple bronze chisels, wooden stakes, maybe llama bone picks. No iron, no steel, yet they sculpted cliffs like butter. It's humbling, and you're not even halfway up the mountain. As you climb, you realize this engineering wasn't just about crops. It was about pride. Every terrace screamed, "We're here, and we're staying." You pause, catching your breath, the altitude reminding you who's boss. The terraces stretch above and below, a staircase to the stars. How did they cut those stones so perfectly? That's next, but for now, you're lost in the rhythm of their work, the quiet genius of hands that moved mountains. You're perched on an Inca terrace, the Andes' chilly breath nipping at your neck, staring at a stone wall so tightly fitted you couldn't slide a credit card between the blocks. Last time, you unraveled the engineering genius of layered terraces and clever drainage. Those weeping holes still make you smirk. Now, you're zeroing in on the stones themselves, how the Incas cut and shaped them with nothing but grit and basic tools. These aren't just rocks, they're masterpieces, carved to fit like they grew from the mountain. Mainstream history marvels at the Incas' stonework, called ashlar masonry, where blocks lock together without mortar. You run your fingers over a massive granite slab, its edges so precise it looks laser cut. The Incas used only bronze chisels, stone hammers, and wooden wedges. No iron, no diamond drills, just patience. You imagine chiseling away, arms aching as you shape a block to nestle perfectly against its neighbor. Each stone was custom cut on site. No mass production, no shortcuts. It's the kind of focus that makes your phone-addicted brain feel lazy. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some say the Incas sang to the stones, chanting work songs to keep rhythm while hammering. Picture you and a dozen others, belting out a tune as chips fly, turning a cliff into art. Historians still argue whether this was just morale boosting or had a spiritual angle, like coaxing the stone's spirit to cooperate. Did they really think rocks listened, or was it just a catchy beat? You hum, half expecting the granite to hum back, but it's silent, smug. You squat, eyeing a stone's odd angles. Some have 12 sides, fitting like a puzzle piece. How? The Incas likely used templates, maybe clay or wood, to trace each block's neighbor before cutting. You visualize marking a rough chunk, tapping it into shape, then test fitting it 100 times. It's slow, obsessive work, but the result? Walls that shrug off earthquakes. You nudge a block, half joking it'll budge. Nope. It's like the mountain glued it there. Here's a chuckle. Imagine an Inca mason dropping his chisel, only to realize the stone's already perfect, like it shaped itself to spite him. You grin, but the precision's no joke. Some stones weigh tons, yet they're hauled up cliffs and fitted without gaps. You spot a trick. Many blocks have small knobs, bosses, left on for leverage. Ropes and rollers move them, but the final nudge, pure muscle. You flex, feeling inadequate, and laugh at yourself. Now, you're picturing the quarry, a chaotic symphony of clinks and shouts. The Incas favored local stone, granite, limestone, andesite, hacked from nearby outcrops. You're there, squinting through dust as workers pound wedges into cracks, splitting slabs free. They didn't have dynamite, but they had smarts. Wet wooden wedges, swollen with water, could crack stone like a bad breakup. You try to lift a chip, but it's heavier than your gym PR. Respect. The fitting process fascinates you. You see workers grinding stones against each other, using sand as abrasive until they lock tight. It's like sanding a door to fit, but on a scale that makes your wrists hurt thinking about it. Some stones are so big, you wonder if they used ramps or just sheer stubbornness. Here's another joke. Why'd the Inca mason quit? He couldn't find his angle. You snort, but these guys never quit. Every block proves it. You step back, noticing how the terrace walls curve with the slope, each stone cut to follow the land's flow. It's not just skill, it's art. The Incas didn't force the mountain to obey. They collaborated. You spot a tiny flaw, a chip in one block, and wonder if someone got chewed out for it centuries ago. Probably not. These walls have stood longer than most empires. You're starting to get why people call this stonework magical, even if it's just sweat and math. As you climb to the next terrace, you realize this wasn't just about building, it was about legacy. Each stone, shaped by hand, was a bet on forever. You pause, catching your breath, the altitude still a jerk. The stones gleam in the fading light, daring you to keep up. How did they get water to these terraces? That's next, but for now, you're lost in the clink of chisels, the rhythm of hands that carved a mountain into history. You're crouched on an Inca terrace, the Andes' sharp air stinging your cheeks as you trace a narrow stone channel where water trickles like a whispered secret. Those perfectly cut stones from last time still blow your mind, singing to rocks. Who knew? Now you're unraveling how the Incas mastered water, turning steep, thirsty slopes into lush farms. These terraces didn't just hold soil, they drank, channeled, and tamed the mountain's lifeblood. Mainstream history hails the Incas' irrigation as engineering wizardry. You follow the channel carved into the terrace's edge, guiding water from a distant spring. The Incas built aqueducts, some stretching miles, using gravity to feed terraces without pumps. You picture workers mapping the land, calculating slopes so water flows just right, never flooding, never stalling. It's math disguised as art, and you're jealous of their confidence. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some terraces had singing fountains where water burbled through stones, tuned to make musical notes. Imagine you're an Inca kid, giggling as the fountain hums a melody. Historians still argue whether these were purely decorative or had ritual purposes, maybe honoring water deities. Was it just fun? Or did the Incas think water needed a soundtrack? You splash the stream, half hoping it sings back. You walk along the terrace, noticing how channels connect like veins, feeding each level. The Incas didn't just catch rain, they harvested it. You spot catchment basins higher up, storing snow melt for dry seasons. It's like the mountain's personal water bottle. The channels are sloped just enough to keep water moving, but not so steep it erodes the soil. You try balancing on one, slipping a bit. Okay, you're no engineer. Here's a chuckle. Imagine an Inca plumber fixing a clogged channel, muttering about leaves like it's your sink. You grin, but their system was no joke. Water reached every terrace, even on cliffs where you'd expect dust. They used clay pipes, stone conduits, even hollowed logs in some spots. You kneel, feeling the channel's smooth stone, worn by centuries of flow. It's hypnotic, the way water obeys their design. The genius hits you harder when you see the drainage. Remember those weeping holes in the terrace walls? They're back, sipping excess water to prevent soggy crops. You poke one, expecting a gush, but it's a slow drip, perfectly controlled. The Incas studied rainfall patterns, knew when the Andes would cry buckets. They built overflow channels to shunt extra water downhill, saving terraces from landslides. You're starting to think they could have fixed your city's flooding issues. Now picture yourself at a spring, high above the terraces, where the Incas started their magic. They didn't just tap any water source. They chose sacred ones, called pacarinas, believed to be divine. You dip your hand in the icy flow, feeling a shiver. Every aqueduct began with reverence, maybe a prayer or an offering. It's not just plumbing, it's a pact with the mountain. Here's another joke. Why'd the Inca water system never leak? Because the gods were on quality control. You snort, but their devotion shows in every flawless channel. You climb to the next terrace, following the water's path. The system's scale dawns on you. Miles of aqueducts, thousands of channels, all hand-carved. They didn't have surveying tools, but they nailed gradients with sticks and string. You try eyeing a slope, feeling like a kid with a protractor. The Incas made it look easy, but you're huffing just walking their handiwork. Some terraces even had micro sprinklers, stones with holes to mist crops. It's borderline sci-fi for the 1400s. As you pause, the altitude pinching your lungs, you realize this wasn't just about crops. Water was power. Control it, and you control life in the Andes. The terraces gleam below, green and alive, thanks to those liquid highways. You wonder what they grew here, how these fields fed an empire. That's next, but for now, you're lost in the ripple of water, the quiet genius of a people who made mountains bow to their will. You're kneeling on an Inca terrace, the Andes' cool soil crumbling between your fingers, as the scent of earth and faint maize husks tickles your nose. Those singing fountains and water channels from last time still hum in your mind. Water was the Incas' secret sauce. Now, you're digging into what grew here, how these terraces became the empire's breadbasket. These weren't just fields. They were labs where the Incas hacked agriculture to feed millions. Mainstream history credits the Incas with domesticating over 70 crops, turning terraces into patchwork gardens. You brush aside dirt, picturing maize, potatoes, and quinoa thriving at 12,000 feet. The Incas used microclimates, each terrace's unique sun and shade, to grow different plants. Lower levels got maize, higher ones frost-hardy potatoes. It's like they programmed the mountain for maximum yield. You're impressed and a little jealous of their green thumbs. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Incas freeze-dried potatoes, called chuño, by leaving them out in the Andes' icy nights. Imagine you're an Inca farmer, stomping spuds under starlight to squeeze out water. Snack prep, 15th century style. Historians still argue whether chuño was just practical or a sacred offering to the gods. Was it survival food, or did it have divine vibes? You sniff the air, wishing for a taste. You stand, scanning the terrace's neat rows. The Incas didn't just plant, they experimented. They crossbred crops, creating potato varieties that laughed at drought or pests. You picture them swapping seeds like trading cards, always chasing the perfect spud. They also used guano, bird poop, as fertilizer, hauled from coastal islands. You wrinkle your nose, but it worked. These terraces churned out surplus food, enough to stockpile for lean years. Here's a chuckle. Imagine an Inca farmer slipping on guano, cursing as his potatoes stay perfect. You grin, but their methods were no accident. They rotated crops to keep soil fertile, a trick modern farmers still use. You run your hand over a low stone wall, noticing how it traps heat, warming the soil at night. It's like the terraces were cozy blankets for plants. Smart, right? Now, you're picturing the planting season. You're there, poking holes with a takla, a foot plow, while your neighbors chant work songs. The Incas grew oca, a tangy tuber, and amaranth, a grain packed with protein. You're hungry just thinking about it. They even cultivated coca leaves. Yep, that plant, for chewing, not snorting. It dulled hunger and gave energy for high-altitude work. You chew an imaginary leaf, feeling briefly badass. The terrace's design screams innovation. You notice their stepped layout creates windbreaks, shielding crops from Andes gales. The Incas also terraced in spirals or curves, maximizing space on steep slopes. It's like they played Tetris with cliffs. Here's another joke. Why'd the Inca farmer love terraces? They gave him a step up on hunger. You snort, but the truth is, these fields were the empire's engine. You dig deeper, unearthing their seed storage tricks. The Incas kept kolkhas, stone granaries, to stash surplus crops. Cool, dry, and pest-proof. These were the Andes' answer to a fridge. You imagine sneaking in, grabbing a handful of quinoa, only to get caught by a stern overseer. Their planning wasn't just about today, it was about tomorrow. That's why the empire didn't starve, even when rains failed. As you climb to the next terrace, you realize this wasn't just farming, it was strategy. Terraces fed armies, fueled expansion. You spot a tiny sprout, a modern descendant of Inca crops, and feel a pang of respect. How did they organize the labor for all this? That's next, but for now, you're lost in the rustle of maize, the quiet triumph of a people who made mountains bloom. You're standing on an Inca terrace, the Andes' sharp winds tugging at your clothes, as the distant echo of work chants hums in your ears. Those potato-packed terraces from last time, chuño stomping under starlight, fed an empire. But who built them? Now, you're diving into the labor and society that turned cliffs into farms. These terraces weren't just stone and soil. They were the heartbeat of a culture, stitched together by sweat and solidarity. Mainstream history notes the Incas mita system, a labor tax where communities sent workers for public projects like terraces. You picture yourself joining a crew, hauling stones up a slope, your village's honor on the line. Everyone pitched in, men, women, even kids, because feeding the empire was everyone's job. The state repaid with food, tools, or festivals, so you're not slaving for nothing. It's teamwork, Inca style, and you're already sore. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers got chicha, a fermented corn drink, as payment. Imagine you're chugging a tangy brew after stacking rocks all day. Happy Hour, 1400s edition. Historians still argue whether chicha was just a perk or a ritual offering to keep the gods happy. Was it a party vibe, or did the Incas spike their work with spirituality? You sip the air, grinning at the thought. You trudge along the terrace, noticing its perfect edges. This wasn't forced labor like you'd fear. The Incas valued ailu, community units where families worked as one. You're there, laughing with neighbors as you pack soil, everyone knowing their role. Elders planned, young bucks hauled, kids fetched water. It's like a barn raising, but for mountains. You try lifting a rock, then rethink it. Teamwork's better. Here's a chuckle. Imagine an Inca teen sneaking off for a nap, only to get busted by his aunt mid-snore. You laugh, but slacking was rare. Duty was sacred. Terraces meant survival. The Incas organized labor by midma, rotating workers across regions to share skills. You're a coastal guy, learning mountain tricks, bonding over sore muscles. It wasn't just building, it was knitting an empire together. Now, picture the scale. Thousands worked on terraces, coordinated by Caracas, local chiefs who answered to the Sapa Inca. You're hauling gravel while a Karaka checks your progress. His Kipu, knotted cords, tracking quotas. No clipboards, just string and knots. You're impressed, but the altitude's still kicking your butt. The system worked because everyone bought in. Terraces weren't for the elite, they were for all. The social glue fascinates you. You spot a terrace wall built by hands from different villages, maybe different dialects. Labor forged unity, like a giant group project that didn't suck. Here's another joke. Why'd the Inca worker love terraces? They were his step to fame. You snort, but these projects gave status. Good work earned respect. Maybe a better chicha ration. You pause, catching your breath, and realize this wasn't just about muscle. It was about trust. The Incas didn't need whips. They had loyalty. Families worked for their kids' future, for the empire's strength. You see kids playing nearby, tossing dirt, learning the ropes. Even they knew. Terraces held the world together. Some terraces doubled as training grounds, teaching young masons precision. You try stacking a stone, wobbling. It's harder than it looks. As you climb to the next terrace, you feel the rhythm of their work. Chant, lift, place, repeat. The Andes loom, but the terraces make them feel human. How did they tie this to their gods? That's next, but for now, you're lost in the pulse of hands and voices. The quiet power of a society that built mountains into home. You're sitting cross-legged on an Inca terrace, the Andes twilight casting long shadows as a faint scent of burning herbs lingers from a distant ritual. Those chicha-fueled work crews from last time built more than fields. They built bonds. Now, you're exploring how terraces tied the Incas to their gods, weaving spirituality into stone. These weren't just farms, they were altars etched into the mountain soul. Mainstream history highlights the Incas' worship of Inti, the sun god, whose light blessed their crops. You squint at the terraces, aligned to catch dawn's first rays, like a solar handshake. Priests stood here, you imagine, offering maize or coca to thank Inti for fertile fields. Terraces weren't just practical, they were sacred spaces, linking earth to sky. You feel small, like the mountains watching. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some terraces had huacas, sacred stones or carvings, treated like divine roommates. Picture you're an Inca, whispering prayers to a rock shaped like a llama. Odd, but it felt alive. Historians still argue whether huacas were just symbols or believed to house spirits. Were they art, or did the Incas think stones had souls? You pat one, half curious if it'll answer. You rise, tracing the terrace's curve, noticing its alignment with the solstice. The Incas designed some terraces as calendars, their edges marking solar or stellar events. You're standing on a giant sundial built without telescopes. Priests use these to time planting or festivals, syncing life with the cosmos. You try spotting a star, but clouds block your view. Typical Andes mood swing. Here's a chuckle. Imagine an Inca priest miscounting the solstice, blaming a cloudy day for his oops. You grin, but their precision was no joke. Terraces often faced sacred peaks, called apus, believed to be mountain gods. You face one, its snow cap glowing faintly, and feel a shiver. Building here wasn't just farming, it was worship, every stone a prayer. Now, you're picturing a ritual. You're there, watching priests sprinkle chicha on the soil, chanting to Pachamama, the Earth Mother. Terraces were her body, each level a gift to her. You kneel, mimicking an offering, feeling the dirt's cool pulse. The Incas believed working the land pleased her, so every plow, every harvest was holy. It's not just religion, it's a lifestyle. The spiritual depth hits you. You spot a small niche in the terrace wall, likely for offerings, maybe coca leaves or a tiny llama figurine. These acts tied farmers to the divine, made labor feel eternal. Here's another joke. Why'd the Inca pray to terraces? They wanted divine crops. You snort, but it's true. Faith fueled their work, made grueling days feel cosmic. You climb to the next terrace, noticing its perfect east-west axis. Some say the Incas saw terraces as steps to the heavens, a ladder for souls. You step carefully, half wondering if you're trespassing on a sacred path. Even water channels, those genius aqueducts, were holy. Springs were divine, their flow a gift. You recall their singing fountains and wonder if they mimicked God's voices. As you pause, the altitude pinching your lungs, you realize terraces were more than fields or altars. They were the Incas' pact with the universe, stone, soil, and spirit in harmony. You hear a distant flute, or maybe it's the wind, carrying echoes of their prayers. How did these terraces face nature's wrath? That's next, but for now, you're lost in the quiet hum of a people who farmed with gods as their partners. You're braced against an Inca terrace wall, the Andes gusts howling like they've got a personal grudge, as rain clouds loom like uninvited guests. Those sacred huacas and sun-aligned terraces from last time made you feel the Incas' spiritual groove. Now, you're seeing how these terraces stood up to nature's tantrums. Earthquakes, floods, and frosts that could have wiped them out. These weren't just farms, they were fortresses against the mountain's mood swings. Mainstream history praises the Incas' terraces for their resilience, built to endure seismic shakes that rattle the Andes. You grip a stone, noticing its inward tilt. Remember that trick? It's not just style, it absorbs tremors like a shock absorber. Earthquakes hit often, but terraces rarely crumbled, their mortarless stones flexing like a dancer's joints. You sway, testing the vibe, but the walls smugly solid. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some terraces had sacrificial layers of loose soil to cushion against landslides. Picture you're an Inca, piling dirt like a buffer, hoping it takes the hit instead of your crops. Historians still argue whether these layers were intentional or happy accidents. Did the Incas plan for mudslides? Or did they just get lucky? You kick some dirt, wondering if it's secretly heroic. You trudge along the terrace, rain starting to spit. The drainage channels, those weeping holes and sloped aqueducts, shine here. You watch water zip through. No pooling, no erosion. The Incas knew the Andes rainy season could drown fields, so they built terraces like sieves, letting water pass without wrecking the party. You slip a bit, cursing the slick stone, but the terrace holds firm. Here's a chuckle. Imagine an Inca engineer high-fiving a terrace after a storm, like it's his buddy. You grin, but their prep was serious. Terraces were angled to deflect wind, saving crops from being flattened. You feel the gale tug your hair and respect the design. Nature's yelling, but the terrace shrugs. They even use deep foundations, anchoring walls into bedrock. You tap the ground, half expecting it to clang. Now, picture a frost. You're shivering as temperatures plunge, but the terraces fight back. Their stone walls trap daytime heat, releasing it at night like a cozy radiator. You huddle close, feeling a faint warmth. The Incas also picked terrace heights to dodge killer frosts, higher for hardy potatoes, lower for maize. It's like they negotiated with winter and won. You're jealous of their weather app or lack thereof. The scale of their defiance hits you. You spot terraces clinging to cliffs, defying gravity and storms. They use local materials, stones that match the mountain's temper, reducing cracks from heat or cold. Here's another joke. Why'd the terrace outlast the storm? It had rock-solid confidence. You snort, but it's true. Some terraces still stand 500 years later, while modern roads wash out. You climb, noticing how terraces step down gradually, slowing runoff during downpours. It's not just clever, it's stubborn. The Incas faced El Niño floods, yet their terraces held. They even built retaining walls to catch debris, like nature's cleanup crew. You imagine a mudslide roaring, only to hit a terrace and sulk away. These guys didn't just survive nature, they schooled it. As you pause, the wind still biting, you realize this wasn't just about crops. It was about endurance. Terraces were the Incas' way of saying, We're tougher than your worst day, Andes. You hear the rain patter, softer now, and feel a grudging respect. How did these terraces fuel an empire? That's next, but for now, you're lost in the quiet strength of stone, standing tall against a mountain's wrath. You're sprawled on an Inca terrace, the Andes' vastness stretching before you as the sun dips low, painting the stone walls gold. Those storm-defying terraces from last time, sacrificial soil and all, proved the Incas could arm wrestle nature. Now, you're tracing how these terraces powered an empire, fueling its rise from a scrappy tribe to a juggernaut spanning thousands of miles. These weren't just fields, they were the engine of Inca dominance. Mainstream history credits terraces with sustaining the Inca Empire's population, estimated at 10 million by the 1500s. You gaze across the stepped fields, imagining them teeming with maize and quinoa, feeding cities like Cusco and armies on the march. Terraces turned barren slopes into surplus machines, letting the Incas stockpile food in colcas, those granaries you pictured earlier. You're hungry just thinking about it, but the empire's appetite was bigger. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some terraces were showpieces, built near royal estates to flex Inca engineering. Picture you're a visiting chief, jaw dropping at a terrace gleaming with perfect stones. Inca propaganda in dirt and rock. Historians still argue whether these were purely practical or vanity projects to wow allies. Were they feeding people or egos? You smirk, suspecting both. You stand, brushing off dust, and picture the empire's reach. Terraces dotted the Andes, from modern Colombia to Chile, each feeding local hubs. The Incas linked them with roads, 15,000 miles of them, runners speeding surplus to where it was needed. You're panting just imagining the relay, but it worked. Terraces didn't just grow crops, they grew power, letting the Sapa Inca flex control over distant lands. You try shouting orders, but the wind eats your voice. Here's a chuckle. Imagine a runner tripping, spilling a sack of quinoa, only to blame the terrace's perfect steps. You laugh, but logistics were no joke. Terraces supported Mitma. Remember those relocated workers? By feeding new settlements. They also backed military campaigns. Soldiers ate chuño while conquering neighbors. You munch an imaginary freeze-dried spud, feeling briefly invincible. Now, you're picturing Cusco, the empire's heart. Terraces around it weren't just farms, they were strategic. They fed the elite, funded festivals, and bailed out drought-hit regions. You see priests offering maize to Inti, tying harvests to divine favor. The empire ran on terraces, like a car runs on gas. You spot a terrace wall, its stones still tight, and marvel at the planning, years of labor for centuries of payoff. The scale hits you. You climb, seeing terraces cascade down valleys, each a cog in the Inca machine. They didn't just feed people, they freed them for other jobs, weaving, building, fighting. Here's another joke. Why'd the Inca Empire love terraces? They kept everyone well grounded. You snort, but it's true. Terraces stabilize society, letting the Incas dream big. You pause, the altitude's still a bully, and think about control. Terraces required organization. Curacas, quipus, mita labor. They were proof the Inca system worked, binding millions under one rule. Some terraces even doubled as forts, high and defensible. You imagine invaders huffing up cliffs only to face a rain of stones. No wonder the empire lasted until the Spanish showed up. As you sit, the terraces glowing in dusk, you realize they were more than fields. They were the empire's backbone, its pride, its proof of concept. You hear a distant llama bleat, or maybe it's your imagination, echoing the bustle of a world built on these steps. What's their legacy today? That's next. But for now, you're lost in the hum of an empire that climbed mountains to touch the stars. You're perched on an Inca terrace, the Andes' cool dusk wrapping around you like a soft blanket, as stars begin to prick the sky above. Those empire-fueling terraces from last time, showpieces and all, carried a civilization to greatness. Now, you're pondering what they mean today, how these ancient steps whisper lessons to a world of concrete and tech. These aren't just relics. They're a mirror for our own struggles with the land. Mainstream history sees Inca terraces as a model for sustainable farming, still studied by agronomists. You trace the stone walls, their curves as sturdy as ever, and picture modern farmers eyeing them for inspiration. Terraces conserved soil, managed water, and maximized tiny plots, tricks we need when climate's throwing curveballs. You imagine adapting their microclimate hacks for urban gardens, but the altitude's making you dizzy with ideas. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Peruvian farmers still use Inca terraces, planting quinoa like their ancestors. Picture you're a local, tossing seeds on a 500-year-old field, texting about yields on your phone, time travel, Andes style. Historians still argue whether these terraces could scale globally or if they're too labor-intensive for our lazy era. Can we match Inca grit, or are we too soft? You chuckle, tossing a pebble, feeling judged. You walk the terrace, noticing tourists snapping pics. These sites, like Machu Picchu, draw millions, boosting Peru's economy. But they're more than photo ops. You see researchers poking at drainage channels, geeking out over earthquake-proof stones. The Incas' tech, remember those weeping holes? inspires green building today. You try sketching a terrace design, but your lines wobble. Maybe leave it to the pros. Here's a chuckle. Imagine an Inca ghost critiquing your city's stormwater system, shaking his head at flooded streets. You grin, but the terrace's resilience humbles you. They survived centuries of quakes and rains, unlike some modern projects that crack in a decade. You touch a stone, warm from the day's sun, and wonder if we've lost the art of building for forever. Now, picture a classroom. You're there, hearing kids debate Inca ingenuity versus tech solutions. Terraces teach sustainability, small scale, low impact, community driven. The Incas didn't bulldoze mountains. They danced with them. You think of deforestation and erosion today, wishing for their playbook. Their Ailu spirit, communal work, could fix our fractured approach to climate. You sigh, feeling preachy but inspired. The terrace's cultural weight hits you. You spot a local farmer praying to Pachamama, echoing Inca rituals. These fields keep traditions alive, tying Peruvians to their roots. Here's another joke. Why do terraces still matter? They're the Andes' step-by-step life coach. You snort, but their legacy, resilience, balance, respect for nature, feels urgent. We're not so different, wrestling with a planet that doesn't play nice. You sit, the terrace's edge cool under you, and reflect. The Incas built for survival, not fame, yet their work outlasts empires. You wonder if our skyscrapers will stand half as long. The terraces challenge you. Work with the land, not against it. Plan for centuries, not decades. You hear the wind carrying echoes of chants and feel a quiet urge to do better. The stars are brighter now, their soft glow cradling the Andes in a gentle hush. You lean back, the terrace's stone cool against your palms, its ancient strength steadying your breath. The Inca's world fades, but its pulse lingers, stone, soil, and spirit woven into the mountain's embrace. You picture their hands, calloused yet precise, shaping terraces that held an empire and still hold lessons. The wind softens, carrying a faint hum. Maybe their chants, maybe just the earth's sigh. You're safe here, wrapped in the Andes' timeless arms, where every stone tells a story of grit and grace. Let the terrace's quiet wisdom settle over you, a reminder that we too can build with care for tomorrow's children. Close your eyes, let the mountain's heartbeat lull you, and drift into dreams where ancient fields bloom under starlight. Sleep well, knowing the earth remembers.